Greetings, another briefing on Russian propaganda, and to begin with, in recent days we have seen Russian propaganda in the West using the entire existing network of pseudo-experts and hotheads to spread its lies about the war that Russia has started against Ukraine. Even the diplomatic corps of the aggressor state is actively involved. The conflict can be called a civil war, Russian ambassador to Great Britain Andrei Kelin said. Such titles have appeared in propaganda resources. Through these messages, the aggressor state is trying to absolve itself of responsibility and say that it is the Ukrainians who are at war with the Ukrainians. They made similar attempts in 2014 when they started this military aggression against Ukraine. A special military operation was a last resort in response to preparations for aggression by the United States and its satellites. Now this is a statement by Russian ambassador to America Anatoly Antonov, and it is also a lie. After all, there were no attempts to attack Russia from either Ukraine or the US, and this war provoked nothing. Also on command, Russian propagandists have raised their networks of pseudo-experts and fake journalists in order to put the opinions they want into the heads of the Western establishment. Let's open Russian propaganda resources. A significant part of Americans, just think about it, want for America, their country, to have a leader like Russian President Putin, writes the American Thinker edition, and is quoted by Telegram channel Putin in Telegram. Let's open what kind of publication is this. Clearly a self-made marginal publication. Indeed, such an article is published there. Let's see what is the source of such statistics. It turns out that the author did not conduct any sociological surveys. She simply writes that we are seeing a growing trend in social networks to see Putin as a Putin-like president in America, and that's it. No links, no primary sources, just propaganda nonsense thrown in. Another example of the use of Western media for propaganda. We discover another Russian propaganda source. The West is preparing to split Ukraine into two after the conflict ends, writes Observатель. I open the original source. Indeed, there is such an article, but the scenario described is only one of those analyzed by the author, for example. He also writes that Ukraine's will to resist and the West's material obligations to protect Kiev remain. The most optimistic vision for the near future cannot be ruled out either. The return of the entire territory to Ukraine, including Donbass and the Crimean Peninsula. Of course, this scenario is not analyzed by propagandists, as it does not fit into their framework of using lies on international information markets. The author of this article, for example, writes that for Ukraine this is an existential conflict, a struggle not only to protect its sovereignty, but also to avoid the seizure of territories, rape, execution, destruction during indiscriminate bombing and artillery shelling, as well as the dismemberment of families with children sent to the re-education camps in Russia. Propagandists also do not mention these facts, as it is not beneficial to them. But this is also contained in the article they use in their propaganda work. Another interesting example on Russian propaganda channels is the quote from Johnny Miller, a Press TV correspondent. Russia is now very much focused, instead of seizing territory, on destroying the Ukrainian army as much as possible. They describe the situation in Bakhmut. Let's see what Press TV is. It turns out that this is a media that is registered in Iran and is completely controlled by the local regime, which in turn has shown loyalty to the Moscow authorities. Thus, by using the English language name Press TV and an English language author to a Western audience without indicating that it is an Iranian media, it is simply spreading the information propaganda narrative that Moscow needs. Speaking about Bakhmut, one cannot fail to mention how Russian propaganda spreads lies about the casualties suffered by the Ukrainian army during the attack on the city by the aggressor state. So on the Telegram channel of the Russia State Corporation Russia Today, Yevgeny Pidubny, who is called a military correspondent of Russian television, says, as they say, every day the Kiev regime is lost in Artyomovsk, that's how they call Bakhmut, about 500 people. Well, this is completely false, and even elementary mathematical analysis will prove it. If the Ukrainian army loses 500 people, then the Russian army, which is conducting offensive operations, must lose 3 times more, 1,500 people. This means that the loss of the Russian army in the Bakhmut direction alone should amount to 45,000 servicemen and prisoners. Of course, Russian propaganda will never say this, because this information about 500 people is completely fabricated. Indeed, Russia stops at nothing to attack Bakhmut, but it simply uses the figures of losses from the side of Ukraine from the selling in order to spread its lies in the media environment. Another example of falsehood is how Russian propaganda decided to invent one of the new heroes of this war. Do you remember earlier they had elderly women with a red flag flag for the opening of the monument, which was even attended by the deputy head of the presidential administration Kiriyenko in Mariupol. Now no one remembers her. They also had a boy, Alyosha, who allegedly greeted the Russian invaders with flowers when they were traveling from Russian territory to Ukrainian territory. Now they have a new boy, Fyodor, who seemingly heroically defended his sister when Russian propaganda threw its thesis of an attack from Ukraine. Now this Fyodor is the hero of all Russian propaganda publications. The investigative committee of Russia presented him with an award. The name of this Fyodor is hung in schools with pictures, with his image, and even in supermarkets. Now they sell citrus fruits with a sticker about the hero Fyodor. Of course, the use of children in Russian propaganda is a complete imitation of Nazi propaganda technologies, which in principle does not surprise anyone. Soon this Fyodor will be forgotten, and new characters will be sought to feed Russia's internal information market. And finally, about debunking the likes of Russian propaganda. A year ago, they claimed that a Ukrainian missile allegedly hit the railway station in Kramatorsk, while in fact an international investigation has already confirmed what the Ukrainian authorities said. It was a Russian missile that killed almost 60 peaceful Ukrainian citizens who were waiting for an evacuation train. Human Rights Watch summarized the result of 10-month investigation. It established that the Russian .U missile was launched from the village of Kunye, 25 kilometers from Izium. This village was under Russian occupation at that time, and the use of this ammunition was confirmed after the de-occupation of these territories. In particular, when Kunye was released, representatives of Human Rights Watch visited village and found the remains of rocket containers from the launch site of these rockets. That is, it was a typical Russian operation under a false flag, as they always do, commit crimes and then blame Ukraine for these crimes. Another proof that not a single word of Russian propaganda can be believed. And with this appeal I conclude my briefing. Trust only Ukrainian mass media, Ukrainian military and political leadership. See you.